Welcome back to the weekend. Donald Trump's national security shakeup has injected new chaos into his administration, as if there wasn't already enough of that. After he announced plans to move his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, from his current post to be nominee for UN ambassador, Waltz will face an uphill climb to Senate confirmation for his new role, given his central role in the Signalgate scandal. But the Washington Post reports Waltz angered Donald Trump before that scandal. Waltz also upset Trump after an Oval Office visit in early February by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, when the national security advisor appeared to share the Israeli leader's conviction that the time was ripe to strike Iran, adding that, quote, Waltz appeared to have engaged in intense coordination with Netanyahu about military options against Iran ahead of an Oval Office meeting between the Israeli leader and Trump. Joining us now is someone who knows Waltz's role well, and also the role that he may head into as UN ambassador. We have former National Security Advisor to Trump, Ambassador John Bolton. So, Ambassador Bolton, you know what it takes to be in the role of National Security Advisor and just the knowledge of the bureaucracy, the sweep and scope of the role. How is Marco Rubio going to balance these two roles effectively?
Well, I think it's almost impossible for anybody to do it. This is not a criticism of Marco Rubio. The jobs overlap to a certain extent, that's true, but they're fundamentally pointed in different directions. The National Security Advisor serves as the president's agent to coordinate policy making and implementation of policy across the bureaucracy, whereas the Secretary of State is the lead diplomat, the lead public figure in diplomatic matters. It's true that Henry Kissinger once held both jobs. Let's start off with the obvious. Henry Kissinger is Henry Kissinger. And number two, it occurred during the very depths of Watergate when the then Secretary of State William Rogers resigned. Many people thought that only Henry Kissinger could get confirmed by the Senate, and he kept both jobs through Nixon's near impeachment, his resignation, and into the early days of the Ford administration before Ford finally concluded the job should be split again, which they were, and Brent Scowcroft got the job. So I wouldn't say that's exactly a parallel the Trump administration wants to draw.
I mean, Ambassador Bolton, the National Security Advisor also plays the role of mediator, right? You have all of the folks that represent the national security apparatus that come to the president with all of their wants and needs in conversation, and the National Security Advisor is supposed to kind of be in the middle, you know, but now you have Marco Rubio who's going to be playing both. I guess how dangerous is this? How, when the American people see that the Secretary of State has this job, but also as the archivist and also as the acting head of USAID, you know, how should we be thinking about our foreign policy, the safeness of this country, when, as we know, threats are popping up every single day, when he's also going to be serving as National Security Advisor?
Right. Well, I think there are two aspects to it. Indeed, Kissinger himself was heavily criticized during his time holding both positions for, surprise, surprise, being biased in favor of his own positions. And to the extent the National Security Advisor can function as an honest broker, that's obviously called into question. But I think even more important at this point, there are so many threats and challenges to the United States and its friends around the world that you need two people doing what are, let's face it, two more than full-time jobs. And again, this is not any criticism of Rubio. I don't know anybody really who could do both jobs satisfactorily. I think what it really shows is the president's just trying to reduce dissidents around him. He wants to hear what he wants to hear. When he seeks other people's opinions, it's not to get their opinion, it's to look for somebody who agrees with himself. He's just reduced the difficulty of doing that by one person now.
Yeah, consolidation of power. Also,
Ned, you heard the president's words there about Marco Rubio and that dual role. You've worked at the State Department, with the National Security Council, as well as at the CIA, and this at the highest levels. How sustainable is that dual role, and at what point could it risk national security?
Well, Chris, Alex, very simply, it's not sustainable. And there's a good reason it hasn't been done since the age of Henry Kissinger. 2025 is not 1975. The issues are more numerous. They're more complex. They're in many ways more consequential. And to say that one individual is in a position to do both jobs, I think fundamentally misunderstands what these jobs are. Something would have to give if Marco Rubio is going to be in both of these positions for a long time. And my concern is that it would be our national security. Both jobs are really two jobs in one. So you're talking about four portfolios here. The National Security Advisor is the top aide to the president, responsible for advising the president every day, waking him up at night if there's a national security crisis, but then also responsible for the interagency. That is to say, the other departments and agencies that play a role in our foreign policy and national security, coordinating them, adjudicating decisions, getting to agreement on the most consequential issues there are. Secretary of State is also more than a 24/7 job. Not only are you our nation's top diplomat, responsible for traveling the globe, meeting with other foreign ministers, presidents, prime ministers, but you're also leading an agency of some 80,000 men and women, foreign service officers, civil servants, and on the line. So to say that one person can sustainably do these two jobs, to say that one person can even do these two jobs for a very short period of time, I think it sacrifices our national security in the name of expediency for this White House.
You'd certainly think that his travel as the top emissary for the United States around the globe would have to be curtailed to some level. So, John, your latest co-authored article suggests, beyond so-called Signalgate, Mike Waltz's hawkish approach to Iran may have been ultimately what cost him the job. So tell us about that. And did Waltz advise to bomb Iran?
That's right. So Michael Waltz was very much in favor of military options for addressing Iran's nuclear program over diplomatic options. He viewed this as a moment where Iran's missile defense infrastructure had been weakened. And it was a moment where the Israelis, especially Prime Minister Netanyahu, very much wanted to conduct these strikes against the Iranians. And he viewed it as the window was closing, and the Iranians could build back their missile defense infrastructure. And this was a time to work with the Israelis ahead of time on presenting options to the president, which were military options. And so that included discussions with Netanyahu, with his aide, Ron Dermer. And the fact that there was such close coordination did irritate the president and some officials in the administration. Obviously, it wasn't as devastating and catastrophic as Waltz's accidental fat-fingering a journalist into a group chat on sensitive military matters. But it was one of the things that irritated the president and just showed that he is more ideologically out of step with the president, a little bit more hawkish, a little bit more in favor of military intervention, and ultimately, these were the types of cleavages that resulted in Waltz getting, he said in that interview, it's not a punishment, but it's a de facto demotion. National Security Advisor is nowhere near as powerful, as influential as the UN ambassador, should he be confirmed.
Look, Ned, I mean, irritated for the president to feel that way. Should he have been fired for advocating to bomb Iran?
Well, look, Alex, I think this points to a larger challenge this administration is facing. They have, as John put it, these ideological cleavages that really run the gamut from traditional mainstream Republicans' hawkish views on issues like Iran to the more isolationist wing of the Republican Party, if you can even call it that anymore, because it's really the MAGA movement rather than the Republican Party, that are led by people like J.D. Vance and, in some ways, Donald Trump. And so it was always going to be a challenge when you put all of these people together without any sort of ideological coherence. And Alex, that is why precisely you need a National Security Council.
Look at Witkoff. He doesn't know anything about Ukraine. He doesn't know anything about Russia. He doesn't know anything about Iran. He doesn't know anything about nuclear weapons. He doesn't know anything about arms control and nonproliferation. And he doesn't know anything about state-to-state negotiation. Really, it's hard to imagine a less qualified person. And yet he is Trump's personal envoy.
Yeah, he's a real estate guy. So, Ned, given the potential dire nature of the situation with Iran and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, how much faith do you put in Witkoff's ability to help resolve these matters?
Alex, I never like to be on the same side as John Bolton on any issue, but it's hard to disagree with what he is saying here. These are some of the most complex issues that the foreign policy establishment of the United States government is dealing with. And a reminder, Witkoff's portfolio has only grown and grown, whereas he started with Russia, whereas he started with the Middle East, which is itself more than a full-time job. It has now expanded to include Russia, Ukraine, and to now include Iran. Let's take those last two. The Iranian nuclear challenge is itself a geopolitical challenge. It is a political challenge, but it's also a technical challenge involving nuclear physics and safeguards that you need the foremost experts of the United States government to be on. Steve Witkoff, again, just as we heard from John Bolton, is a real estate developer. 4 months ago, he was in the real estate business. And to say that he is not capable of doing it, it's not a reflection of him. It's a reflection of human nature. You can't go from a real estate developer to engaging with some of the most tenacious and skilled negotiators in the Iranian negotiators that we're going to face. Same is true as Russia and Ukraine. My fear is that he's treating this as a real estate dispute and not the really values-laden conflict involving democracy, freedom, sovereignty, territorial integrity that the United States needs to treat it with. And I feel the results will be reflective of that.
Donald has people quitting on him. You got to remember that some of these people are his own staff and they're giving up on him. But you also just have government officials, former and current, giving up on him. And you got to remember that when you're president, your staff includes your own core staff, right? It includes your own core staff that you directly hire and fire, but it also includes all that legacy of people. The people who existed not as Democrats or Republicans working in the federal government, but as public servants doing their best to do their best job under any president, whether it was Trump, Biden, Obama, Bush, the other Bush, Clinton, whatever. Going all the way back to George Washington. Right? And many of those people resist the urge, even after leaving office, to be critical of current presidents. Because I think, one, a lot of them aren't partisan. Two, a lot of them realize just how... Because, like, these people haven't been president, but even being close to a president, I think you realize that it's not an easy job. Like, it's not. It's not an easy job. And so they want to show, grace. Like, man, this is not the easiest job, whatever. But also that up until Trump, there was a sense that we should be above that partisanship. I'm a former top public servant. When I'm loyal to the government, not to Trump, not to Biden, but the United States government's apparatus. But Trump has made it so that I must quit my loyalty. I must exit. I must resign to the fact that I cannot just allow this to happen. I have to, in some cases, quit Donald Trump's employment, but in other cases, just quit my silence about what happens here. And this is why you see generals speaking out more than before. This is why you see top civil servants speaking out more than before. Because when they leave and they speak out, they have to be honest. This is not a normal president. And as such, you cannot treat him with the normal, nonpartisan courtesy. Trump is a fascist, and that's why so many people are acting different about him.